Let's talk about rods for fishing a stick float. At its simplest, a 13-foot match rod matched to 2-pound line is good enough. But if you want to get the best out of it, a rod that's fairly tippy, not a through-actioned rod, will make life easier. You get a crisper strike. It needs to be fairly light to hold, not top heavy, and well balanced, as I say, to 2-pound line. You should be able to fish down to 20 hooks, 22 hooks without any bother, and that's going to do the job well. Years ago you'd get lots of splice tip rods. Companies like Daiwa, TriCast did quite a few, Shakespeare as well. I've got a few left, an old Bruce and Walker John D, that's nearly 40 years old. A couple of good Daiwa ones. I'm going to show you one here. This is the tip of a amorphous whisker match, stick float special, very fine tip, spliced in about there, and then quite a bit stiffer in the bottom half of that top joint, and then the middle section's fairly stiff. There's a lot of power low down there, but you can fish down 22, 24 hooks and get away with it with 12-ounce bottoms if you want. Very nice rod to fish a stick float. Same with some of the connoisseurs, and they did other models with splice tips. The John Allerton TriCast rod, the John Allerton Premier Match, is a rod I've got. That's got a splice tip, but it's not as tippy as that rod I've just showed you. More of an all-round rod, very nice to fish a stick float with. Out and out Waggler rods. This is a Normark Vantage Super Match. You see it's more of a through action there. Still fairly fine tip. A nice all-round match rod for light fishing 2.5 pound line. But this one more suited to fishing a Waggler or a Croquelaven. But as I say, you could still fish a stick float with it. You pays your money and takes your choice. In the cheaper end nowadays, people like Cadence, whose rods you won't see in tackle shops, as mail order only. Their rods are £100 or so. Some people like the Drennan Acolytes. I'm not a fan. I think they're too soft for fishing a stick float and too soft when playing fish. Daiwa do some good rods. TriCast are fairly expensive. Right up at the top you get people like the Browning Sphere rods with splice tips. Very good rods. Not one that I've seen yet or handled. I prefer a 13-foot rod. I think it's lighter, easier to wield. I don't fish under my rod tip on a stick float very often, so having a longer rod to fish under my rod tip's no advantage. I'm fishing too far out for that. So a 13-foot rod's the perfect compromise for me. Some people like 15 or 17-foot rods. I think they're too unwieldy, too heavy. There are very light ones, but I don't think there's a great advantage for fishing a stick float. If you're fishing very deep water, 14, 15, 16 foot, and you're not really talking fishing a stick float, then that's a bit different. Let's talk about reels. I've gone down two routes over the last few years with fixed spool. I've got Shimano Stradics. I've still got my Mitchell matches. I've got lots of Mitchell matches and quite a few Stradics. The Stradic 2500. This one's a few years old. Rear drag, fighting drag. Very smooth reel. A near 40-year-old Mitchell match that's been battered to death. When you see it's got a different gear plate in black and all sorts of spare parts. Don't know how much of this reel's original now, maybe only 3/4. This has got the advantage of that. This is a good old manual, take it away. The big difference, if you look at this reel going round, this one is going clockwise when you look at it, and this one is going anti-clockwise when the line's not tangled around it. and that makes a difference. When the line's coming off the spool with the Mitchell match, it comes up against the back of your finger, against your fingernail. With the Stradic, it's coming off the spool against the front of your finger. It used to be argued that that was better that way round in the days when Mitchells were up against the Intrepid reels. Intrepid worked the same, that went round the same way. I've got so used to controlling the line with these, feathering the line when I cast and controlling it from the spool as it goes down the river, that I prefer the Mitchell matches. I just fish better. I've been using them 40 odd years now, so as long as, if you can get hold of a good Mitchell match, you've got to look after them. They've got to be oiled around the bail arm and the bits inside, bits of grease in there, oil into the handles, proper grease inside the gearbox, but they will last a very long time. When it comes to lines, we want a line that's, we're fishing top and bottom, so the line's staying on the surface. You can sink a line with a back shot, but generally you're looking for a line that will pick up off the surface. A fairly new line helps with this, so if a line gets very old, doesn't matter what brand it is, it's going to start to sink and it gets dirty basically. A couple of lines I've been using, Dave Harrell Pro Float and Pro Match. Pro Match is slightly dearer, slightly more supple. I think the Pro Float's a bit tougher, a little bit stiffer. You get 300 meters on a spool. I use the 3 pound 0.14 millimeters. I do 3 loads off that. Need to change it fairly often, every few weeks I suppose. Don't expect it to last 6 seasons, but it's a good line and it's obtainable. I have to get it mail order because my local shops don't sell it. Dave Harrell's not sponsoring me for this, but there's a line I'm using, tried and tested. A lot of people still swear by Bayer 2.1 pound or 2.6 pound or even 3.2 pound, by which time it's getting quite thick by the time you get up to the 3.2. There was a time when we used to use 1.7 pound Bayer. It was a very, very good line. Very tough, floated beautifully. It's got that shiny finish. I'm not so sure now. I don't think it's as good a line as it used to be. I think they've changed the grade of it. And to be honest, when there's better lines out there, I wouldn't bother. I have tackled up, I've got a few spools of this stuff, I've put it on a reel and then just found it snapping like cotton. I'm not that convinced it's that good anymore. Years ago I used to love this stuff, Team Daiwa line. This is the dark brown one. There was a black one, absolutely fantastic line for fishing a stick float. I used to use a 1.5 pound in the black line, or 2 pound. This is the 2 pound in the brown, 2 pound the 2.5. Can't get it for love nor money. I've got a box or two of it and those boxes are going down, but it's finer than the Dave Harrell line, so when I want real finesse, that's the stuff. A final word on lines. A lot of people will tell you that lines vary in density. When it comes to standard monofills, which is what these lines are, they're all exactly the same. They're slightly denser than water. They all sink, but the finish is different. The shiny lines float because surface tension holds them up. The matte lines, which is Maxima basically, will sink. Absolutely brand new Maxima will float reasonably well, and you can fish a Waggler. I prefer Maxima for fishing a Waggler, and you can fish a Waggler with Maxima with a line on top without too much bother. That's it for this video on rods, reels and lines. In the next video I want to look at the floats in a little bit more detail and how to best shot them up and the shot used. After that we'll get on the riverbank some more, learning about casting a stick float, line control and how how the float goes through the swim. If you like this video, please click likes and please subscribe to my channel.